corruption, blood, espionage. This story has everything. Today I'll be talking about the FIFA World Cup 2022, which is going to be held in Qatar, and why I personally will not be watching it. The FIFA World Cup is the largest sporting event in the world, and that's not an arbitrary statement. By viewership numbers, by TV streaming numbers, you can easily see that. So, for me to miss that tournament, I would be pretty, sad to do that because I love football. Football is my favorite sport at this point to watch, and I've really come to appreciate everything about it, which is why I was really excited for this World Cup. But the stuff that I learned, which I'm going to share with you today over the course of the last few months, has really made me change my opinion and perspective on whether I should be watching this or not, no matter how much I love the sport. So let's get right into it. The first thing that I would like to tell you guys about is the bidding process of how a country can become the host of a World Cup. Now, this is not a straightforward process by any means. It has, plenty of room for corruption. And when there is room for corruption, corruption always comes through. And that was seen by in 2010 when they did the bids for the 2018 and the 2022 World Cups, where, they had this huge event where representatives of countries were called and they put in their bids. And then the representative of all countries vote. All countries who are FIFA members. So that means they can have a team that can play in FIFA competitions. FIFA is the football federation of the world. They're the governing body, right? So all these countries have come to vote on who is the, who's going to be the host for the World Cup. And what carries on now is a very, very interesting story because we have these Russian agents, these KGB agents, sent in the middle of the night to find out who each country is voting for by infiltrating their emails, infiltrating their meetings to find out who each country is going to vote for. And then this information is given to some rich parties. One of these parties is the Qatar government. And the Qatar government really wants to host a World Cup for tourism purposes because they're trying to diversify their economy to move away from oil. And, they just want Qatar to be a big name, and just like how Dubai has become from tourism and everything, they want Qatar to be like that, and they think that this is a wonderful opportunity to get in on this. So they put in a bid to host the World Cup. But of course, Qatar is a country with no football heritage, no football history. So how are they going to convince the world, that they are a deserving location to host the World Cup? And when you can't convince someone, what do? You buy them. And they paid off $1.5 million to several representatives of African and Asian countries. And what ended up happening is that because of this bribery and because of this corruption that was deep-rooted, including all the way to the president of FIFA, it worked. And the countries voted, and Russia got the 2018 World Cup, and Qatar gets the 2022 World Cup. Both of these are extremely corrupt decisions made by, people who are completely paid off. So there is almost no significance to this. And I'm not just saying this. This was a corruption scandal that was found by the US Department of Justice in 2015, in which they arrested top FIFA officials. They arrested several top FIFA officials, including the president of FIFA at the time. So if the president of FIFA at the time was known to be in a $150 million corruption scandal, how can you even trust that the results of such an election or such a bidding process was legitimate? But yet, it was too far gone into the process, and in 2015, nothing could be changed. The 2022 World Cup was going to be hosted in Qatar. Now, a country that has no football history, suddenly they have to host a World Cup in 12 years? 2010 is when the bid goes through and gets confirmed. So in 12 years, you have to, build stadiums and build so many things, because if you have no footballing history, how do you host a World Cup? Every other country had to build 1 or 2 stadiums to host their World Cup because, they have already football stadiums because they are all countries with football history. Brazil, South Africa, all these countries have stadiums. Right? But Qatar doesn't, because Qatar is not a country with sports or football history. So what do? They have to build stadiums now. And what's the easiest way to build things? using cheap labor. So they get in labor from India and Nepal. And these workers are told that they're going to be given high salaries by recruiters in India and Nepal. They're told they're going to be given high salaries, and this opportunity seems incredible for them, because that means that they're going to be able to send money back home, and this is going to be a very prosperous situation. They've heard of plenty of people going to these Gulf countries and making money, so it's a very, very lucrative proposition. They get a passport, they get to go abroad, wow, they get to sit on a flight, wow. So they're very excited and they take this opportunity, and several tens of thousands of workers flow in from India and Nepal to Qatar. Then what happens when they reach Qatar? Their passports are confiscated. Their passports are confiscated and they are told that they will not be paid. Now what do they do? What do they do? Because they can't escape. They can't. How do they go back to India now? They can't send money back. So their families, who they told that they were going to be, looking in good times now, they're also left in the lurch. And now these people have to work to build these stadiums. And what else? What other option do they have? They start building and building. It's so hot in Qatar. It's incredible. It's unbelievable to believe how hot it is. And in that heat, they have to build these stadiums. And they build and build, and they get hungry. They're not given enough food. They need to sleep. They're not given enough time to rest. They're constantly made to work and work. And several of them die from exhaustion. So a report from Al Jazeera and The Guardian found that over 6,500 migrants died between the years 2010 and 2020. And this was a really, really catastrophic, thing for Qatar's reputation. And Amnesty International, which is a human rights organization, decreed that this is unacceptable and something has to be done about it. So in response to that, now they've been given wages. Like, now there's a law in Qatar that there is a minimum wage and stuff like that. But the damage has been done. These stadiums are built, and despite reports coming in 2014, 2016, nothing was done until 2020. So between 2010 and 2020, so many workers were allowed to die and, in fact, made to die. These stadiums are built on the blood and on the dead bodies of these Indians, of these Nepalis, who worked so hard for nothing. So that is the blood that Qatar has on their hands. That is the cost of this World Cup. And that is the reason that I don't feel, good about watching it or even taking part in it, because how can I support an event watching these players play football? Yes, football is a beautiful sport, but at what cost? On the lives of these people who did nothing wrong to die, who did nothing, they were in search of a better life. It's shocking. And other things that Qatar has done, they've moved this World Cup from a summer World Cup. It's been a summer World Cup throughout the years. From 1930, it's been a summer World Cup. This is the first time it's a winter World Cup. Why? Because it's too hot to play in Qatar. They determined that it was too hot for these players to play in Qatar, but it was not too hot for the workers to work. That's crazy. And for all this, they've also made all the stadiums air conditioned, because the fans, even in December, it's very hot, and even in the winter, it's very hot, and still these players and these fans need to be accommodated. So they've made them air conditioned stadiums. Do you understand how much, impact that can have on the environment? When you have to generate that much electricity, when you have to generate that much, use that much fossil fuel, release that many chlorofluorocarbons into the air, when you have to air condition an outdoor stadium, that is crazy. And these team, now of course a country with no team, football team, they get directly access into the World Cup. The host nation gets direct access into the World Cup. So what happens? They need a team now to compete. So they start bringing in people from other countries and giving them Qatari citizenship and rights and everything. Why couldn't they do this to the workers? Why couldn't, if they had the funds to do so many other things, to put in so many things, why couldn't they just pay wages to workers, minimum wages, with no worker was asking for a lucrative salary? And they had the process to bring them in from other countries and give them citizenship and give them rights. They just chose not to do it. So the hypocrisy and the double standards are showing everywhere, that it was only these workers that had to suffer while everybody else is set to have a good time at this World Cup. And another horrible thing in this country is the homosexuality laws, where most football countries are modern enough to allow homosexuality, but Qatar, it's hangable. It's punishable by death. So in such a country to have a World Cup, and then the security teams are planning to, and this has been like officially announced, that the security teams are planning to confiscate flags of pride flags and all other kind of flags that show any kind of activism. That is so silly in a country where in a world where we're so promotive of free speech, or we're so promoting of other things. How can we allow something like this to take place? And I've heard plenty of arguments against my points on this World Cup, that convincing me to watch it or whatever, saying most countries are built on slave labor. I agree with that. America, where the next World Cup is going to be held, the 2026 one, built on slave labor. So many other countries built on slave labor. But there's a difference. They were not built between 2010 and 2020. Right? We know better now. And it is far enough into the future that we have a choice now, that we don't have to participate in these things. So I don't think it's the same. Another argument that I've heard is, how can you blame Qatar for it? Like, isn't it the Indians' fault for coming? That is such a bad argument, because they were not signing up. Even the recruiters may not have known that their passports will be confiscated. And even if they did know, it is not the country's fault or the people's fault for going, for wanting better opportunities, because that is not how our world works, and that is not how humanity works. You don't cheat people and then tell them that it's their fault for getting cheated. So yeah, I'm really distraught about this whole situation. I get quite emotional while talking about it every time, because it has, I really wanted to watch the World Cup, and I really am interested in football deep down in my heart, but I cannot bring myself to care about this World Cup, knowing the cost that was paid. If you choose to watch it, I have no problems. I understand that it's a very amazing sport, and a lot of people just they find themselves being very conflicted, and they just can't bring themselves not to watch it, and I completely understand. But I hope I could inform you about the reasons why I won't be watching it, and the different things that took place to make this World Cup happen. Usually I say let's find a lesson in the end of all these videos, but I really don't think there's much of a lesson that can be learned from this. That's not pretty obvious. So yeah, thank you for watching Arny News.